S07E16.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, doing really well. It's good to be back on after a few weeks off.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good few weeks since you were last on. Can't remember the last game you would have been on before. Was it before the international break? I guess with the Middlesbrough game, maybe, or the Barnsley game. I mean,
it was all doom and gloom the last time we spoke, and so I'm hoping that I'm not the jinx for the upcoming fixture. I know that Michael was very superstitious previously with the Wigan podcast. So let's pray that I'm not that spanner in the works.
Certainly. Well, yeah, look, I mean, Dan and I last week sat here and we did predict, or we sort of hoped for at least 4 points out of the two fixtures against Cardiff and Millwall, sort of thinking if we can manage to grab a draw in the game against Millwall, that would be a pretty good result. And of course, it's 6 points instead, which is fantastic. So we'll start with that win against Cardiff, first of all, which was in some ways they're both pretty impressive wins for different reasons. But I guess for the Cardiff game, having Elder starting at centre-back because we were Bernard down with a suspension, Elder then going off with a concussion halfway through the game and getting the debut from Mills coming off the bench. First touch, almost giving away a goal as well, but pretty inexperienced backline in that sense, in a back three, sort of fighting against the adversity and coming away with the 3 points after a Keane-Lewis-Potter header.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned that it was one of the key fixtures, or a very important fixture for different reasons as to why it was so impressive, but obviously, we talked about the slide that we'd been on, and just I guess a team like Cardiff that are kind of in and around us. We knew that it was an early season 6-pointer, and particularly when you look at the flaws of City so far. I mean, goal scoring has been a problem for us, but particularly defensively, we've leaked a lot of goals, and so. To mention the situations that and the hardship that we face, to be able to keep a clean sheet nonetheless, with that level of adversity, is a huge testament to the team. But I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead because I know we'll talk 3-2-1s later. But I think this game was in so many ways the making of Jacob Greaves. And we've talked about how good he is, and how much promise he's shown. But with Bernard and Callum Elder obviously out of the picture, for him to have the game that he had, it was so impressive, and fair play to him.
I mean, you want to talk formations? I think we're trialing an experimental 2-6-2-6-3 or something like that. I mean, the amount of times that he'd find himself up on the wing, and I was sort of double checking to make sure it was Greaves getting up there, and he was the one who essentially, I mean, yeah, we'll talk about the Millwall game in a second, but he was the one who essentially got the ball in the box for the Honeyman header in that game. So starting to get a decent cross on him, and yeah, he's playing incredibly high up the pitch for a centre back.
And and as you mentioned, like one of the criticisms we've had, and we've heard a lot of fans voice about Grant McCann. I mean, if we wanted him to try experiment, I don't think we were looking at that level of experiment, but
yeah.
It's obviously it's paid dividends the last couple of weeks, and so it's good to see a centre back in the form of Jacob Reeves getting forward like he is, and I guess it's hard not to draw those parallels to one Harry Maguire.
Yeah, certainly. And then, of course, we also had Huddleston come on for when Elder was injured, so it's good to see Huddleston back out on the pitch. I saw the tweet, I think it was, that the last time that he was, in his pomp playing for City, Keane-Lewis-Potter was, an 8-year-old or something like that watching. We've sort of talked before, he was sort of queuing up, getting a pizza from the Allams when we were signing Ben Arfa and Hernandez on that deadline day. And of course, was just a City fan back then, now playing alongside him in the City side. Must be a surreal experience for Lewis-Potter, and probably makes Huddleston feel pretty old as well.
It has to be a surreal experience. I mean, that's what every young boy dreams of, particularly, boyhood club, and watching Tom Huddleston, who would have been a huge signing for us at the time, to find himself on the field. I'm sure that he's, pinching himself. But again, like you think about the core that's been bought, and, there was a real discussion over whether Tom Huddleston was worth the punt at the start of the season. And, was it worth going out and chasing him that hard? And we got excited when we heard that he was coming on trial, and was going to be training with the side. Like, obviously you can't help but get optimistic. And I mean, even in the limited time that he spent on the pitch, I mean, that game, just the security and the safety net of knowing that you've got someone like Tom Huddleston who can sit back and fill that, central defence position as well as a little bit higher up the pitch and spray balls in the manner that he does it. It goes a long way to take pressure off, the back four or back three.
Yeah, certainly. So it's good to see him back and fit, and hopefully, sort of, if nothing else, he's a good presence to have around that squad and around that team on game day, and with his experience in the side. The other positive I'd mention was the Randell Williams had a fantastic time tackle late in the game. Sort of up there with the famous tackles of the past, like the Harry Maguire double tackle and the QPR players, things like that. Where I think live, I thought it was Ryan Longman, but I think he'd gone off the pitch at that point. But just a perfectly timed clearance tackle as well. And it's great to see. It's sort of similar to last season. It's great to see the whole squad really starting to lift and get a bit of confidence. And it's good to see those peripheral players starting to lift and really push for a place in the side as well. And when you get to a position now where it's sort of a case of, well, who do you drop? And we'll probably talk about a name in a second who you probably could. But generally speaking, there's not a whole lot of players that you'd be thinking, who do you drop? It's more, how do you fit everyone in? Because everyone's playing so well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, there's been glimpses of those of the people that have been tested in the forward line. Tyler Smith was one that really kind of revealed himself and looked like he was going to feature and almost was the lead man in the front three for quite some time. And it's what you want, exactly what you want when you've gone out and signed these players that even though they haven't been playing for their clubs that are Championship, Premier League football teams, you need them to come in and actually show their quality. And I guess that's the point of those loan signings. And we did make a lot of signings, and they were relatively unknown. I know that entering the Championship, we didn't feel incredibly optimistic about certainly the money that had been spent. But yeah, to see these guys starting to kind of force their way into the fold, it's fantastic.
And then I guess not to put too much of a damper on things and talk negatives, but I guess there's still probably a bit of concern around Wilkes's form. So, I've sort of talked in previous weeks about it. It seems as if he's not fully fit, whether he's just had a poor preseason, whether he's just low on confidence. I don't know what it quite is. Grant seems to sort of be persisting with him, and he did get the second goal against Birmingham in the previous week. So you think maybe if he's got that goal under his belt, he can get a bit of confidence and get going. But against Cardiff and then again against Millwall, just probably wasn't himself, and probably needs some time out of the spotlight. Maybe I think the pressure might start to get to him, the expectation might start to get to him as well.
I think you could be right. I think the other aspect that we have to consider here is there's a real change in the way that the front three played last season in League One. And I remember Burnsy mentioned that Grant McCann had taken the front three aside and given them a bit of TLC. And from that moment, we saw a huge change in how prolific they were in their goal scoring. They went on a run. It was just after a flat spell. I think it was that period, maybe around Christmas time. And I wonder if that is certainly, it gives us a glimpse of the type of manager Grant McCann is, where he wants to show faith in those players. And maybe it is his lasting, relationship and the full picture of what's going on with Wilkes in the background that leads him to believe that Wilkes is still the way forward, despite, as you mentioned, not really showing the same level of form that he did show and was underdone in the preseason. So, look, I don't have too much of a problem with it persisting in that way. But you do kind of ask the question, at what point is that going to stop? Particularly when you've got, players like the donkey in Eves, who are knocking on the door every time he does get put on, usually late in games, and throws himself about. There's a genuine desire to be there, and it's very obvious to see. And I found it really strange watching the tail end of the Millwall game when Eves got put on the field, and just hearing the nature of the crowd. He's somewhat become a fan favorite almost instantly.
Bit of a cult hero, yeah.
But despite the fact that he still gets slated on social media, the fans at the ground seem to really appreciate the energy and effort he was putting in. So, look, don't have a problem with the Wilkes situation. I just know that it can't continue for too much longer. And if we're still having the same conversation in a month's time and Wilkes has not shown any form, well, then I think that there's probably a bigger issue at play. But for now, I'm happy to see him bide his time.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, let's go through our MVP votes for the game then, and we'll move on to the Millwall game after that.
Yeah, look, the 3 points, as I mentioned before, was definitely Greaves. I just can't think of how you could even put anyone else, close to the performance that he had. It was fantastic. I guess the conversation now is like KLP for the goal is definitely worth a shout. It's such a crucial time, and particularly in a period where we haven't been that prolific. So, well done to the youngster. I probably still had Baxter in my 1 point for this. I thought that he was quality, and he just hasn't really put a foot wrong. I think that was a pretty edgy clearance, if I'm remembering the game correctly, that we were all kind of, I think collectively in the chat, we were very concerned about. But apart from that, he just, he's done really well. And we talked about how good Ingram was at the start of the year. So, I'm sure that when the season began, he was wondering whether he would, find himself in the fold at all. And so to see the way that he's come in and played is fantastic. So that's probably my 1 point.
Well, to put things in context, so prior to the Cardiff game, what Baxter had played the 2 previous games. So Ingram had missed the 2 previous games, and he's still leading our best and our MVP votes for the season. As such was his form to start the season, and such was the regard that we held him in. So it's pretty incredible the sort of the nature of the performance from Baxter to be so good that it's like surpassed Ingram's, the expectations on Ingram, and there's no sort of calls that Ingram should come back into the side, and that's not a negative on Ingram. It's just the fact that Baxter's performances have been so good. So no, certainly worthy of a point there. Yeah, I've gone the same as you for Greaves for the 3 votes and KLP for the 2. Greaves had a team high 5 tackles as well, and 2 crosses like we're talking about, and created a big chance. So getting up the field, getting more attacking, sort of going on those maraudering runs, which is great to see for the side. And a player we haven't really touched on too much on the podcast, who probably does go under the radar a little bit from our point of view, but has been getting a lot of plaudits on social media and at the ground as well, it is Mclaughlin. He's sort of the more forgotten man, I guess, in that back 3, who's also been a bit more consistent alongside Greaves the last few weeks, who's been putting in terrific displays as well. Team high 4 clearances against Cardiff as well. So really sort of knuckling down and making that spot his own, which is great to see. And it means that when we've got Bernard fit, when we've got Mclaughlin there and Greaves, it does give us a legitimate back 3. Makes an interesting conversation for when Jones comes back, or when Jones is fit again, as to whether he gets back into the side, because I don't think you can drop Mclaughlin in the form that he's in, and the fact that you can't drop him also really sort of lends a bit of credence to sticking with the 3-5-2 as well, which should certainly be great to see, and it's certainly bearing fruit at this time. Okay, well then let's move on and talk about the Millwall game. So we did have Bernard come back into the side for Elder. It was a pretty like-for-like switch in that sense, with Elder having been playing at centre-back the previous game. This one was probably one that, having won 3 games in a row against sides around us, you think, okay, it's a pretty good run. As I said before, we were probably looking at this Millwall game and hoping for a draw at best. It's probably been our worst performance in a little while, to be honest. Pretty shaky in patches, conceded that goal, which was probably just a bit of poor defending. But we came through and got the win. So it sort of shows that belief in the side that's growing, and that confidence to keep pushing on and try and get that winner, which we eventually got through Longman.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll probably reveal a little bit of the discussion of what happens in the background with the Whole City podcast and the boys group chat. But I know that this game, particularly the Millwall, obviously with kickoff being 2 a.m. Australian Eastern time, I know that it's a struggle for many of us, particularly deep into the second half on a very early Sunday morning. But I was kind of on the fence with this, and I felt like I had a huge amount of energy swings. The first goal when we scored, I was feeling extremely optimistic, and it was so good to, as you said, continue in the fashion that we've been playing. It really looked like we had momentum, and as they found the equaliser right on the stroke of half time, I did get those dark, is it time to go to bed thoughts, and can I actually sit through the second half? But I was so glad to stick it out and to see us, show that resilience and show the level of desire that, certainly wasn't there at the start of the season. And it was very, very obvious, particularly when we fell behind in games early. And that's what impressed me so much about this performance was we had the lead, had it wrestled back, and then was able to regroup and kick back on with it. So an incredibly gutsy performance under really trying circumstances, but to come away with the 3 points and to keep the momentum going. I think you were the person who said that we've doubled our points tally in the last 2 weeks, which is a ridiculous stat, but just speaks into the feeling in the club at the moment.
Yeah, and I'll confess, I was actually away at a Bucks weekend for the game. So I was actually in the middle of a poker tournament and had a couple of drinks for the night as well. So I was actually really fortunate. I kept glancing over at the laptop I'd set up to watch the game, and every time I glanced over, well, not every time, but I managed to glance over and actually catch our goal as it was in the build up and being scored, and then sort of unfortunately also caught their goal as well. So I did actually see them live, which was good, and I did get a good sense of the game as well. Managed to sort of stick on for the second half as well, which is good. I actually won the poker tournament, which always puts me in a bit of good spirits to stay up and watch the game. And yeah, look, as you say, it was great to press on and get that winner. And Honeyman now with, I think it's 3 goals and an assist in the last 4 games as well is tremendous. And I don't know if you saw the bit of an interview with him, because he'd grown his mow out for Movember, and he basically said, "Oh, well, it's a good luck charm. I can't really shave it off now, but see what the missus says." So seems like there's great spirits around the club at the moment as well.
Is there a more enjoyable City player to watch score? I think that when Honeyman gets on the score sheet, there's just a genuine level of entertainment where you see his face light up, and you see like the entire City squad like fly after him. But there's just a pure joy that hits his face, and I get excited, particularly when Honeyman finds himself on the score sheet for that particular reason. But look, we've spoken about George Honeyman at length before, and he's one of those players who was initially polarizing. And the question that we've always had is, we saw what he could do in League One. We know that he was touted as a pretty capable championship player before. But to see the form that he's in now, he absolutely belongs in the championship. And, he's playing incredible football. And I know that goals aren't exactly a huge part of his game. So to find himself in this, rich vein of form and becoming a prolific scorer, it's unreal. And there, every week, you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He has the respect of, the playing group, and he's just a leader. He covers every single blade of grass every game. And he's just a joy to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying while we were on that poor run of form that the biggest frustration was that Honeyman wasn't fit. We couldn't see what we couldn't see. We didn't give him a chance to see what he could do in the championship after that tremendous season in League One. And as you say, I mean, it is sort of funny to think back to that first season with us in the championship. He just didn't get a good run in the side, I think. And when he did, it was so stop-start that I think he was just trying to put himself around the pitch to prove that he should stay in the side, and just didn't get the best out of him. But the confidence that he has now after the season he had last season, he's growing into a leader at the club. And I mean, for all that I think Smallwood has really silenced the doubters, myself included, he's really silenced the doubters and is putting together a great season. I think there's a pretty strong case to be made to make Honeyman the captain going forward, I think, in this side. I think he, as you say, he seems to already be quite a natural leader in the side. And when he scores, when he's involved in the players really rise up to the challenge. So he's sort of got that infectious energy about him, which is really great to see. And I was watching the highlights back the other day, and my wife actually turned to me and she said, Honeyman's actually quite a good-looking guy. So I was like, oh, I've got to watch out of it. But he's clearly getting a few admirers on this side of the world as well. So he's putting together a great season, and it's all sort of just clicking now. We've got the 3-5-2, which is bringing the best out of the players. We've got Honeyman on the pitch doing his thing. Everything really seems to be gelling around the club at the moment, and it's a great time to be a City supporter. There's a very strong, good feeling around the club, I think, for some reasons off the field, but also on the field. Everything's just sort of falling into place.
There just feels like a much greater level of security watching City play. I think that we were so leaky at the beginning and looked really reckless going forward. I think that on the very few occasions that we did, feature in the final third, teams would just, have a field day getting back on the counter against us, and we looked incredibly disorganized. And just to see now the way that to actually score against us, you really have to you really have to provide something special. I think I was looking at a stat in the last 4 games. I think I mentioned it was like 7 goals for, 1 against.
Yeah.
That is the proof in the pudding. That goes to show the work that's obviously being done on the training ground. And as you mentioned, the team chemistry seems to have, they've really started to gel. And let's remember we're entering the first day of December today. There's still a long way to go before the championship season concludes. And it's really easy as a fan to get carried away in those early few months. But I think the comfort of crawling out of the relegation spots in such an emphatic way, and not just because we've had a couple of lucky wins against the teams around us, but actually the performance on the pitch is a far more encouraging and look far more stable is what is driving the sense of optimism around the club at the moment.
Certainly, yeah. So go through the 3-1 votes for this game, and then we'll talk a bit off field before doing our little quiz. So I think it's hard to go past Honeyman for the 3 votes. I've gone for him getting the goal, really just running the show from the middle of the pitch, having a tremendous game again. I don't think you can fault him for this game at all. Again, Greaves for the 2 votes. I think Greaves is another tremendous game. As I sort of said while we were talking about the Cardiff game, it was really his cross that went in for the Honeyman goal. I think it was credited to somebody else who I think took a little touch off on the way through. But Greaves whipping the ball in, solid at the back as well, and just growing game after game. It's crazy to think he's only 21 years old and he's already a mainstay in this side now. And there was a few rumours during the week about interest from Premier League clubs. I think there's been word that the owners of the club, whoever they may be in January, are going to turn down any bids that come in for KLP and Greaves, and I think that's a very good stance to have. But it just shows that he's getting interest from bigger clubs who are sort of paying attention to this rise in stature of this player, which is fantastic to see as well. And then, I've gone for Baxter for the 1 vote. I think he put in a few really important saves, especially late in the game, to keep us in the lead. And it was great to see during the week. And it's always hard how much to buy into what a player on loan does say when they say that they're open to a permanent move. I think they're always going to say what they think the fans are going to want to hear. But he's had such a good start to his time at City. 4 games in, seems to have a real connection with the fans. I had to sort of double check that when I saw that he's only 23 as well. So he's quite a young player as well. And if he can sort of grow and develop in this City side over the next few seasons, he could become, a top line player for us.
Yeah, certainly. I was pretty similar to you in the 3-2-1s. I went Honeyman for 3 as well. Jake Greaves for 2. Again, what a period he's having personally, as well as obviously the team. But the 1 point for me, I gave that to KLP. I thought Baxter was. You've kind of just jogged my memory a little bit here. I thought he was pretty influential, but there's a feeling of when KLP gets on the ball that gives me a level of confidence. You see the defense often just back off. Particularly when he starts to kind of put a little bit of footwork and steps over the ball and runs at defenders, you see that there's an air of panic that almost sets in because there's such an unpredictability about how he plays. And it's such a pleasing sight. So I thought there was a couple of passages in that Millwall game that he really just changed the feel of the game as a fan. And so I gave my 1 point to him. But yeah, it was as I said, just the impressive nature of the fact that I were able to get back in the game is the thing that stands out for me after that setback at such a crucial time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we'll talk probably the man of the moment, apart from the players themselves. Grant McCann, very likely to be, certainly to be nominated for Manager of the Month, and quite a good shout to win it, I would say as well, considering where we started the month and where we finished it. It does raise the question. There's been a lot of speculation when Arjun does take over the club, which there has been fresh reports that it could be as soon as this week. We don't know that for sure, but potentially in the next 7 days. That there's been a lot of links to his mate Shota, who'd come in as the manager in that case. And I think a month ago, when that was first sort of raised, there, no one really batted an eye at it because of the form that we were in. But I think we said on this podcast that it does raise an interesting question. If Grant does string 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wins together, which he could quite feasibly do, what sort of position does that put the new owner in? I mean, you can't. You think it's a very easy decision to sack a very unpopular manager a month ago, but I'm not so sure that the decision would be met as positively as it would have been back then. What's your sort of take on it? Do you think Grant sort of earned a chance to prove himself under a new owner, or it's better just to start a new page?
I'm really surprised to answer the question this way, but I'm incredibly on the fence with this one. I sort of don't know. I mean, I'd love to go through the history books and find out if there's ever been a manager of the month that's been sacked in the corresponding week. Like if there's a statistic out there where that's happened, I can't see how you would ever find a fan base that would support that, and be on board with. Like at the end of the day, we've talked about it before. Regardless of how Grant McCann speaks and how well or not well he's received by the fans, particularly in the interviews, and he said some questionable things at press conferences that we haven't liked, and we've chatted about those things at length on this podcast. But at the end of the day, if your manager's winning, that's what they're employed to do, and football's a business result. It's if you're winning, that's what managers are going to judge you on. Your win-loss record, your percentage. What are you going to bring to a club? And the personality and things like that are secondary components to your role. I just can't see how you can find a way to make a case for Grant McCann to be sacked after a month. I mean, he's historically he's brought us the League One title. He got us promoted. I mean, he did get us relegated in the championship. If you can harbour that blame to him, many people would make the case that you would attribute that to the owners and the way that things were dealt with and the amount of players that we lost as a result of very, very poor people management. But I think that the guy at this point in time, as we sit here and discuss tonight, he's done enough to warrant holding on to his appointment. And it's certainly not how I would have answered that question in October. And I think I would have had to have gone far and wide to find someone who would have made a case and argued with me.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think the interesting thing in this is, because I completely agree, I think it's almost impossible to sack a manager at this point. The only inverse that I can think of was who am I thinking of? Mike Phelan as caretaker manager, winning manager of the month in the Premier League, and then getting the job. So it's almost like the temporary manager, winning manager of the month. I can't think of a permanent manager, then losing their job. So yeah, it'd be a very strange situation, and particularly as a neutral sort of looking into the club, they'd probably find it quite mind-boggling as well. I mean, I think the sort of the best sort of aspect of this is that if Arjun was to come in, say in the next 7 days, it's the start of December, I would hope, hypothetically speaking, I'd hope that he can sit down with Grant and basically say, okay, well, we've got December's fixtures, we've got Reading, Bristol City, Nottingham Forest, Blackburn, and Sheffield United, and maybe Blackpool as well on the 2nd of January. And you say, okay, so that's a period of 6 games, I think it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You say to him, if you win 3, 4 of those games, so call it 3 games, then we just get going. We'll see what the season's looking like. We'll back you in January, see if we can see where we can finish the season. But say if you can only win 1, 2 games of that, maybe then they say then we'll have to reassess in January, and at least then Grant knows where he stands, but he also gets a period to audition, and it's before the window opens. So you could have Shota as, I mean, bit unsavory to be sitting in the background, lurking over Grant, either physically or metaphorically. But you can have another manager perhaps already sort of assessing the squad if things were to change and you did need to bring someone else in for the January window. But you can give Grant that audition. You can say to him, so I mean, Bruce didn't really get that at Newcastle. He got 1 game to get to his 1,000 games managed, and then he was sacked. But you sort of think theoretically you should be able to get that chance under the new regime. Where if things don't work out, then you've at least given them the chance. You've got that defense to the fans that you haven't just sacked them the minute you've walked in the door, and it doesn't impact us too much in the January window if we do want to make a few moves. But it's a really interesting situation that we probably didn't expect to be in a month ago.
And do you think it's fair to say that if we are thinking that way with Grant McCann, the things that we've mentioned before about he's certainly not in the time that we've supported City over the last decade plus, we have become very accustomed to fan favorite managers. Like Steve Bruce was very well liked. I think Mike Phelan was very well liked. Marco Silva was certainly well liked. We've seen Phil Brown, even with not the most impressive record, was very well liked. And Grant McCann has never come across as as a manager that galvanized the fan base.
He's probably the least liked manager I can think of since Nigel Pearson, and that was even not to the same extent. Nigel Pearson was just not liked for the interviews, whereas McCann's probably also just the results on the pitch at times as well.
And so, I mean, that's the flip side of the coin with this is, I mean, I don't think that the fans, if Grant McCann was to be given a trial period, as you suggested, and he was to lose a couple of games in a row, particularly if they're teams that aren't exactly what you'd say, highly ranked in the championship. Again, I don't think that there's going to be, much response or much reaction from the fans. I think they would be more than happy to see him go on the back of, of a couple of losses. And I think that's a really tough predicament. That's such a tough position for Grant McCann to be in. And obviously he knows that, his job, rightly or wrongly, is going to be heavily scrutinized, and in some ways is still hanging by a thread, despite the incredibly positive run of results.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I'd say, as much as we'd feel sorry for someone losing their job having just turned the club around to win 4 games in a row, is for him, it's the difference between potentially his next job being a League One job and a Championship job. Correct. if he puts this sort of run together with City, he's now showing other clubs that he can actually manage at this level, that he is competent enough to be considered for other Championship jobs. Whereas if we were still on that losing run, if we were still on 9, 10, 11 points and the new owners came in and sacked him, he'd be sort of looking at a sort of mid-table League One job to take on and get another chance. Whereas now his fortunes have sort of turned around. So even if he was to leave the club, I don't think it would necessarily be with any, I mean, maybe there would be bitterness. I don't know. I can't presume to know McCann's feelings, but I think the opportunity that he's now giving himself means that he's in a much better position leaving, if/when he leaves the club.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I can't see anything wrong with that.
Okay, well, we did have announced the other day that over Christmas we will be joining in with the To Hull Back podcast for a Christmas episode, and it will be yourself, Logan, myself, and also Dan in a 3v3 quiz against the To Hull Back correspondents. So unwittingly, we've been doing these triple flashback quiz questions all through the season, and I'm certainly hoping that they will come in handy with a bit of trivia knowledge for that one. But looking forward to that one. I think it's on the it was at the 21st of this. I should pull that up so that I can actually quote the right date. I believe it's the 21st of December. Here we are, 20th of December. My apologies, but it's 21st of December our time. So it's Tuesday morning our time, Monday night over in the UK, which will be a lot of fun over on the To Hull Back channel. But we've got our quiz question for this week, which is, can you name the last 3 players to win Player of the Season? And the sort of the trick on this is that we haven't necessarily awarded a Player of the Season each season. I think to sort of give you a bit of a hint, I think the 19-20 season, so the COVID impacted season, we didn't award a Player of the Season, for instance. Presumably would have gone to Bowen, who'd already left the club, and I suspect they didn't want to do that. So there's not necessarily a Player of the Season for each season. I can give you the seasons if you want that as a hint.
Okay, let's go with this for the start. I think that last season, which we're talking the 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would have to say that George Honeyman is the person here, and I'm basing that on the fact that he got the League One player of the season. I think was voted by the players, I believe, and so I think it would be pretty safe to say that if he was widely regarded as one of the league's best players, that he probably got the nod at City. I don't know if you're going to give me a nod of affirmation or you just
I'll say bingo for that one. That's correct.
Okay, so then we have to go back 2 seasons from that where there wasn't a player awarded things. So we're talking about the season where this would have been under
Adkins.
At Nigel Atkins, and we came. This was when we survived late, wasn't it? We had am I thinking of the right?
I think that was that was the previous season. So the two players we've got are for the 18-19 and the 17-18 seasons.
Okay, so in that season, I would need to come back a season 2. So I would. This could be. The fact that you've given it away in the sense that you said it wasn't Bowen.
Oh no. Okay, sorry. I
think Bowen is the player for this one. I think that you confused me there. I think Bowen that was where he really started to come. So, and I assume, I want to be safe by saying I think Bowen probably would have got it twice, even though he had left the club.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we've got Honeyman and Bowen.
The third one's a bit of a curveball, so I can give you their position if that would.
Look, I remember this season because this was when Harry Wilson was on loan, and he became incredibly prolific towards the end. If I'm thinking of the right period, I'm not confident enough to say that Harry Wilson was the person. I can't remember if I assume it probably wasn't a striker. And I think I'm trying to remember now when we lost some bigger signings.
I was just going to say you're getting warmer now because it's a player you would be surprised was still there that season.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to.
I can give you a hint. I won't give you their position because I think that gives it away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Help me out. I don't know if I'll have a clear conscience at answering if I get 3 from 3, but I do would like to phone a friend.
They were, I think. I don't know if they led the league or they were one of the top in the league for clean sheets. Well, I guess that sort of gives away the position, doesn't it? So it was our goalkeeper that season.
Yeah. Which ended up. I'm just trying to think of who was there. Why can I not remember this? It has to be either David Marshall or Alan McGregor. But I can't remember which one.
Flip that coin.
It's a Scottish keeper. And the thing that I remember about, I thought it was incredibly ironic that we had the 2 Scottish keepers at the club at the same time. And I remember David Marshall went through a period where he was awful. And then I remember him going through a period where he's quite good. I'm going to say this is Alan McGregor.
Bingo. Yeah. I was stunned that McGregor was actually with us that whole season. I'd completely forgotten. I'd forgotten that we essentially went the first season under Slutsky, and then Adkins was McGregor. Then we had Marshall, and then we had Long. So we had 3 seasons with 3 different keepers. And you're right. Like, it was pretty stunning that we had McGregor and Marshall in the same championship side that season, and McGregor walking away with the player of the season. Yeah, considering under Slutsky we conceded a lot of goals. But McGregor, I think it must have been that second half of the season went nuts with clean sheets and did quite well. So, walked away with the player of the season, which is pretty remarkable. So there you go. Yeah, Honeyman last season swept all the awards from memory. I think he got the players' player, the supporters' player. I think there's another one as well. Official supporters club player as well. Bowen, of course, as you said, going nuts with his goals in that season and would have got it the next season as well. But I'm sure the club just in a relegation season didn't want to give it to a player who'd left halfway through. And McGregor, yeah. Okay. Well, all that leaves for us to do then is preview this game against Reading we've got this weekend. It's kind of interesting. We're talking before the podcast. No midweek games in the championship at the moment, so it's a bit of an easier schedule, which is good for players to sort of rest up and recover from any small niggles and knocks. Veljko Paunovic, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, I don't know if I am, was appointed in August of last year at Reading. They just missed out on the playoffs last season as well, so has a pretty reasonable record with them. They're sitting below us on the table, but that's with that points penalty affecting their total. And I think it was Danny Drinkwater came out during the week and sort of said that they're still targeting the top 6, which I've got to say begs the question of if they're targeting the top 6 and sitting below us in the table, what that says about potentially our ambitions if we do start to kick on a bit. But there you go. They did sign Andy Carroll about a week or two ago. I think I saw that he's on £1,000 a week for his short stint with them, which is an interesting salary that he's got. I think he's just sort of trying to get back to fitness and get up to speed in the championship, which would be interesting for him. But they've got a number of ex-Premier League players, and they've got Scott Dan, they've got Danny Drinkwater, Baba Rahman, who was at Chelsea for a bit as well, which is probably why they're in a bit of trouble with FFP as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd certainly be an interesting game. And we sort of alluded to earlier the potential new owners coming in for us in the next week or so. Quite appropriate that we're playing Reading, who are owned by the last set of owners who the Allams had ridden in the programs, said their farewells. These guys were meant to take over the club, and it all fell through. So sort of a bit of a sliding doors. We can see what we could have had and what we will have in a week or two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the sliding door moments are very interesting, particularly when you look at the penalty that they've succumbed to, and if there's probably a good reason in the background. And it's what I think is always going to be clouded for us as City fans is what good decisions did the Allams actually make, because we're always going to have the cynical lens when we think about their time at the club. But it's really hard to make a case that every decision they've made has been a poor one. And what happened in this negotiations with the club owners of Reading, there's probably a good book to be written, later down the track to what the untold story was. But
when all the NDAs get expired or whatever, I'd love to get a book that peels back the Allam administration at City. There'd be some interesting stories to hear.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we have to be as level-headed as we can and try and recognize the good that actually has come under the reign of the Allams. Although I think there's going to be a very exciting, new wave when the official announcement is made, touch wood, when the club does get sold, that, hopefully we can see a real coming together of the City fan base and be galvanized again and go back to seeing some of the crowds that, we've become so accustomed to in the glory period earlier on.
Yeah, certainly. So they've got one win in their last 5 against us, but they've got 2 wins in their last 5 in the league. Did manage to beat Swansea last weekend, which was a pretty impressive result for them. I'd say that probably Swift is their most dangerous player. I think he's created some absurd number of chances for them and involved in pretty much all of their goals as well. So he's certainly their danger man for this game, I would think. Changes to the side from last weekend, I'm struggling to think. I mean, I guess if Elder's fully fit, you could probably put him in at left wing back, and then push Longman up forward and pull Wilkes out of the side potentially, as maybe the only change I'd make. I can't really think of much to do with the side.
Look, it'd be really, really tough to kind of make any real big wholesale changes, given as I said, the magnitude of the performance against Millwall was such a pleasing one. And as you mentioned, without the very concentrated period of games where you inundated with midweek fixtures, there's probably no reason to rest anyone and to freshen the legs up. So I would be surprised to see almost any change. But as you said, if there is any case to be made, you would probably look at Malik Wilkes, losing his starting spot. But I would be really surprised to see Malik Wilkes make way to the bench, given the fact that we've seen Grant McCann stick with and show him.
Yeah, no, certainly it will be an interesting game in that sense. Do you have a score prediction for this one?
I think this is a dangerous fixture. I think we look down. Reading do have 8 wins, and there's some pedigree that you've already mentioned. I just think at this point in time, with the momentum of being on 4 straight wins, there's such a confidence, and I think that to go and put in a performance against a team that does have the credentials that Reading do have. Would just be a huge boost if we could turn this 4-game winning streak into 5 wins. As you mentioned, you get to 24 points, and although it doesn't necessarily change the ladder, you're right back in the middle pack, and that's certainly where we want to be looking over this Christmas period. I think this is going to be a close one. I wouldn't be surprised to see us lose it, But I'm hoping for a 1-1 draw. I think that would be a pretty positive result.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about the 4 wins in a row now is it sort of emotionally hedges the game for the weekend. Where I wouldn't be upset necessarily if we lost this game, in the sense that I think, as you say, Reading have a lot of good players, a lot of quality players, and the table position is probably a bit misleading for them given that points penalty. So a loss of them isn't it's sort of similar to the Millwall game, I think, where you say they're that sort of quality side where you can back yourself to get the win. They're not a Fulham or a West Brom or a Bournemouth. Back yourself to get the win, but it's not a sort of an end of the world if we were to lose the game. I probably agree with you. I probably think a 1-1 result would be quite acceptable and something that I'd be quite happy to walk away from their ground with. It was good to see that it's a sellout of City fans as well. So really, seeing that support come out and back the side now, which is great as well.
It's also probably worth noting, as you touched on earlier, and you alluded to it as the trial period or the audition for Grant McCann under probably the new owners. There's probably 5 or 6 games that we do see after this Reading fixture that I guess the focus on this fixture, although you want to win every game, if it was to be a disappointing result, I don't think it would be as grim as the slide that we've seen previously up until these obviously last 4 games. So I don't think the onus is such a bad one, in the sense that it's a must win, or there's a huge element of cost associated to this game, knowing the fixtures that do come. But you win this game and you head into that group of fixtures with 5 wins on the bounce. The confidence that we may see, like if there was to be something special like a run towards the top 6, that would be the time period that you would look to as a pivotal part of the turning point in our season.
Yeah, I think I tweeted out earlier in the week 5 wins in a row was Grant's longest winning run last season. And the last time that we did 6 wins in a row, I think, was under Nigel Adkins in his last season. That run of games that sort of finished with that 2-2 draw at Villa. I think we were up 2-0 in that game and dreaming of the playoffs. And then I think someone got injured. Was it Elphick or someone like that got injured in at halftime, went off, and it just completely changed that game. But yeah, look, it's a good target. If we can win this game against Reading, it's Bristol City next, to a very much a gettable side. And as you say, it just puts us back in that middle pack of the table. I sort of alluded to it a bit earlier about dreams of the playoffs, but it's probably a little bit out of our reach. But are you sort of reassessing where you think we can finish this season, or is it very much just a case of get as many points on the board as possible, get away from that relegation zone, and whatever happens, happens?
Look, from what I've seen from City in the last couple of weeks, it's given me a lot more promise to the capabilities that this side actually does have. We hadn't seen, like, prior to these 4 wins. I mean, the opening day against Preston was an incredibly promising performance. I think the draw against Bournemouth, showed that there was some fight in the side. But outside of that, we haven't really seen much. And whilst I'm probably not comfortable to make any drastic predictions about where we could be headed, I think the fact that what we're seeing is far more promising has made me reassess the capabilities that we do potentially have amongst the current squad. I guess the factor that you may like to hold on to, if we're being optimistic and dreaming big here, is what's it going to be like for the players when the club inevitably does change hands and the fans return. If there's a couple of really promising signings that do come in the January transfer window on the back of a pleasing December, well, I mean, I think that's when we sit down and have a conversation and can fully reassess, what we're looking at. But look, I would love to go that far ahead, but as we've seen, football changes very quickly, and the month of December is absolutely a huge month in the scheme of things as to what could lie ahead for City. But until we see some of these big pieces start to fall into place, let's just worry about staying away from that bottom 3.
Absolutely, no worries. Well, thank you for coming on this week, Logan.
My pleasure. Lots of good stuff to talk about.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll be back this time next week to discuss the result of that Reading game and fingers crossed, hopefully some bigger news as well off the field. But until then,